So welcome to the C2SMARTER Industry Roundtable. We're super lucky to have Sanni from Dollaride, Nav from Strata, and Tara from Numina. We're going to ask some questions, talk amongst yourselves, and then take the last 10 to 15 minutes to open questions up from the audience. So if you think of something that you particularly want to ask, hold on to it. Also, real quick, I'm Eugene. I'm a professor here at the C2SMARTER Center, representing the C2SMARTER Center. So to start things off, I think it would be nice to kind of learn a little bit more about all y'all. So if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, and then also kind of a little bit about your company and how you came to either start or be involved with that company. Maybe we can start with you, Singh.
Sure, I guess I'll go first. So good afternoon, folks. I'm Sanni. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dollaride. Dollaride is a mobility company that focuses on urban transit solutions in areas that are transit deserts. My background really quickly is actually in investment banking and software sales. Those were the first jobs that I had right out of college. I went to Boston College for undergrad and for graduate school. But through that experience, I became more and more exposed to tech, and that's what inspired me to become an entrepreneur. But growing up in New York and living in transit deserts in Brooklyn and in Queens inspired me to actually pursue a solution to that issue. I had the actual lived experience. So yeah, it's a little bit about me and Dollaride.
Hey everybody, this is Nav. I'm the founder and CEO of Strata Analytica. We provide operational intelligence for cities. And my background is actually very traditional in terms of engineering. I'm a PE. I did structural engineering, undergrad and grad. So in my previous role, I saw that there were many processes that could be automated and common thread of where people were repeating tasks, so that kind of made me think of a way to kind of augment and automate a lot of these fundamental things that engineers and planners and project managers who are managing and designing cities do on a daily basis. So that made me kind of take an interest in tech and really learn how to build things, and then from there that's how I started the company.
Hi, I'm Tara Pham. I am one of the founders and the CEO of Numina. My background is actually sort of in my past life in public health research, studying how city design influences people's transportation choices and how those choices then influence their health. So specifically, I was studying basically how do we design places to encourage active transportation, walking, biking, intermodal trips, which often involve public transit, as opposed to just driving, which is sitting stationary in a car, which sometimes people are doing hours a day. And in that work, I very quickly learned that cities don't actually have a lot of data about how people use streets if they're not driving. We're mostly counting cars, and then that's how we're thinking about traffic demand and the like. So I was interested in studying bicycle and pedestrian behaviors. And then actually my co-founder and I started Numina after we were both hit by vehicles while riding our bikes and made that problem feel very real. And so we set out to build a better bicycle and pedestrian sensor that would give urban planners easier access to multimodal traffic data. Fast forward now pretty many years, we actually measure all kinds of things. Bicycles, pedestrians, cars, buses, trucks, motorbikes, dogs, bags of trash, all kinds of things that happen in streets. And we do that with our own sensor platform that has now deployed in 50 cities around the world, and we are currently deployed in 4 boroughs of New York as well.
All right. I'm muting myself. As you can see, we're very lucky to have these folks here. And just really quickly to make sure we're all on the same page, Sue, do you mind introducing Dollaride as well and what y'all do?
For sure. So Dollaride is a mobility company that creates what I call urban transit solutions, but geared towards areas that are poorly served by public transit. So what this looks like and what we really do on a day-to-day basis is engage with the private sector, so it could be large employers or other institutions that need transportation services. We try to understand their needs, but then we develop solutions to fit those needs that are not actually provided by the public sector, so like by the MTA. So right now in New York City, we have a big project going on where we're helping the local dollar vans adopt technology and be of service to employers and other institutions around the city that need transportation. For those of you who don't know what dollar vans are, they're like this underground network of drivers and commercial buses that serve the outer boroughs. But for decades, those drivers didn't use any technology, so it's very hard to find them unless you live in their precise neighborhood. So my company is providing like a digital layer on top of that industry so that other businesses can use them in their capacity to transport people. So that's just one of the examples of the things that we do that is solving transit gaps in major cities.
That's fascinating. Kind of related to that, what has it been like kind of trying to deploy technological solutions in kind of these areas which are historically maybe either a little averse to technology or doesn't have that much experience with like particularly new digital solutions? Yeah, I'm really curious about what that experience has been like for y'all.
The experience has been both the most rewarding and challenging thing I've ever done. And I'm sure my colleagues here will explain similar things about building their own businesses, but the big challenge in bringing tech solutions to the real world is that a lot of folks are resistant to change, and then you also have like literal technological barriers for people to adopt software or specific hardware, and then on top of that you have maybe even regulatory requirements or challenges when you're dealing with the built environment. So those three things have just made moving really quickly a very difficult thing to do in this sector. So that was the big learning point for me when I maybe about a year or two after starting the company, we were quick to create a software product as a prototype, but actually implementing it and then getting a significant amount of adoption was the real hard part. So that really changed our point of view on what does it really need? What do we really need to get adoption for these new products and services? And through that learning experience, it's informed how we deploy our solutions now, where they're really built around the customer and the community that we're trying to serve, as opposed to us coding away in a closet and then going, ta-da, you want to use it now? Yeah, that shit does not work.
Okay, so,
yeah, maybe just to provide like some examples and some color to what Sue said, because I think we deploy physical hardware that deploys on usually public infrastructure like light poles. So we've had similar challenges of like, you develop a product and maybe the users themselves are literally just not ready for it, and it's hard to get them to adopt. In our case, and also not just for them to adopt like as users, but we sell to government, so there's also these weird hurdles of like procurement. Like a lot of cities actually don't even have clear systems for procuring software because they're used to procuring like brooms and trash trucks and like very physical or capital intensive things. But something like software as a service that has like a recurring fee, some cities are still kind of figuring out how to do that, or they've only figured out how to procure those products in the last like 5 years. And then in addition, I will say, building like a physical product for cities, a very clear-cut example in our case, and there are many, but like one very specific one is that light poles across the country are all completely different. They're on different kinds of grids with, you know, different voltages. Some are only electrified at night. And so we had to design our physical product, for example, to have different SKUs where basically there's a backup battery of a different size. And so in some cities, the light pole is powered 24/7 and we can kind of deploy our smallest unit. In other cities, we have a larger sensor that has a bigger backup battery that charges overnight when the light pole is only hot, you know, at night, and then that powers the device throughout the day. So as we're working with different cities, I mean, New York City itself is really crazy, and I think we all work primarily in New York City as well. But yeah, when you're building a solution for many different cities, they really are, it is very difficult to find like a one-size-fits-all solution, which is sort of counter to the traditional tech industry. Like tech as a sort of industry and in its business models inherently wants you to find something that is like super rinse and repeat, super one size fits all. And I think with cities that's just a bit more challenging.
Yeah, for sure. So we don't have hardware, we're a software company, but we face similar challenges. Strata Analytica is on the newer side of things, and we're still discovering as to how customers are using our product or exactly what they want. And we found that depending on who you talk to, especially at the public sector level, everybody has so many different needs. And what we try to do is really find that common thread to identify, okay, what can we build really quickly that solves a problem for the largest group in a certain sense. And even now we're looking at the private side as well, because a lot of private sector companies, the traditional companies, the billable hour companies, if you will, they interact with cities. And cities often rely on those types of companies as well. So we're still in that discovery mode, if you will, to find, okay, how can we utilize and build where all these interactions can happen. Because our goal is to really build on process and how much can we augment for the planner, the engineer, the project manager, the operational individual who's building and managing cities.
Thank you for the answers. If we dig into that a little bit more, if we go back like a year in time, what is something you would, maybe tell yourself about this process of getting your product or your solution rolled out that you kind of didn't expect or wish you had known or would do differently now?
Talk to as many people or customers as quick as possible.
I would say I feel like a year is not a very long time in this particular industry.
Let's go back like 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually say in working with cities, I think we have been, on the one hand, you really want to like talk to your users and build the best product for them. And on the other hand, you kind of learn that cities make decisions a very specific way. And I think I would tell myself, especially as like a younger entrepreneur, to not be afraid to like kind of go as high as possible within the organization, because actually the way a lot of cities operate culturally is the people who are kind of doing the work really need permission from their superiors to like spend time on something or to dedicate resources to something. And it is actually kind of shocking, and both, in positive ways and in negative ways, but it is surprising how much like a director or a commissioner cares about these very minute operational things and can say, work on this now. And like that, if you make a product that they suddenly take an interest in, it's amazing how many resources can go to that. And if you have not talked to the right person, you can really kind of be like banging your head against the wall for a long time. And there are lots of other kind of nuances that are both, I think, positive and frustrating with selling to cities. But I think the one thing that I maybe earlier in my journey was afraid to do was like kind of go higher in the organization earlier.
I think if I could go back at least a year's not enough. But from, go back further, I wish I would have known, or if someone would have coached me to realize that I could probably spend less time on venture capital as the source for funding to fuel the company, and actually replace that form of capital with service contracts to cities or to government. This is something that we've figured out or unlocked literally like within the last 18 months. But we could have saved ourselves a lot of time and effort and headache if we would have known that, our cities and state government agencies are very much willing and able to hire us to do things, and that source of funding is just as good, if not even better, than the funding that I was traditionally seeking, which is venture capital, which has its own set of rules and formalities, and is frankly very difficult to obtain. So, hopefully what we're doing can be like something that other entrepreneurs can learn from and realize that they have different forms of building their businesses.
Yeah, these are kind of things that I imagine you would only learn from being on the ground and not, being out in academia, like looking at a problem at a distance. And if I'm taking anything away from your answers, is that you should always just go talk straight to the mayor as soon as possible. So in a kind
Just
of
don't call him on his cell phone. That is being watched.
Gonna not comment on that. In a kind of student-centric question, kind of what technological or academic skills have you found useful as an entrepreneur, or that you look for in people who work with you, work for you? What kind of things skills should people be trying to acquire to either prepare themselves for this or to work in this area?
I can start. I mean, there are many very specific vocational skills, and a company like ours where we're hardware, software, AI, selling to government, dealing with public policy, there's so many, but I would say broadly the thing that I've found most valuable, especially in a startup employee, I think this is true in any job, but especially in a small company, is understanding what motivates your user or your buyer, really who is their boss? What does it mean for them to succeed at their job? And then how do you frame, your offering, your work, your pitch, whatever it is, to that? Because I think a lot of, in our space, either our users have very specific climate goals, populations they're trying to serve, or they just want to save time, they have very tedious jobs that they want to make easier. And as much as you can frame whatever you're doing to that very directly, it's so much more effective, and you would really be surprised how many people, especially in tech, just go around saying a thing they think is cool and a thing they think they're good at, and they are not actually serving a need that they know their partner, customer, user has. And I think the more you can be in tune with that, the better judgment you have across so many things. For example, if you want to interview for a job, don't go to the employer and say how great you are. Go to the employer and say how you're going to make their company better and more effective at what they do. And basically, as startups, we're trying to do the same thing with our customers.
That was a great answer.
Yeah, basically what Tara said. We look for individuals that can bring value to the company's mission and in turn potential customers. And I do personally look at things where people think in frameworks essentially and can describe the problem, the solution, the concerns, all that. And being able to do that it's not as easy as it sounds. And if you can kind of answer that for yourself, then you can kind of also, and are able to convey it, that really helps in terms of being in this space and building something new.
So maybe kind of one more question that you'd only really get through on the ground knowledge. What are, and might be interesting to people who are thinking about doing startups, what are kind of unresolved technical challenges that you run into that you think are like pretty big hurdles that would require more work, would be useful to you if they had a solution, or kind of, yeah, let's start there.
Does this have to be problems that we face, or that things that we just like?
Honestly, either. Yeah, either is fine.
I mean, I'd be remiss not to talk about driverless vehicles or autonomous vehicles. So I think we're seeing more and more of the applications of this type of technology in the real world. You know, in San Francisco right now, at least, I mean, it started earlier this year, but both Cruise and Waymo were allowed to operate like publicly in the wild, and you know, you can download their apps and hop in a driverless vehicle. But then, like as of like a couple of weeks ago, Cruise's license to do this in the city of San Francisco got suspended because they have run into some issues with public safety. You know, I think generally, even for my business, I've had to become more aware of the advances in technology that are related to driverless vehicles, and how close are we to having that experience that even us here in New York City can enjoy. Because basically, this could either be a threat to my company, or it could be maybe another opportunity or avenue for us to integrate, you know, the informal transit world with you know, other tech solutions. So you know, I think overall, because there's so much money invested in this sort of driverless technology, and it has the public's attention, it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. There's going to be a lot of companies continuing to try. There's going to be other cities and other states that invite Waymo, Cruise, and the other companies to test. So, you know, the more we can be prepared for these things on our city streets, then the better you can position yourself as a student trying to join one of these companies, or an entrepreneur looking to partner or compete. So those are things that I've been thinking about.
In a very niche, like computer vision problem, I would say that like every computer vision company struggles to build good training sets. Like that's just a very expensive task that every good computer vision company, like what makes them good and what is sort of their strong IP often has to do with their actual training data sets. So I don't know, like I'm curious about generative AI to help build those out, or any other tools that kind of, there's a bunch of annotation platforms now, but I think there's like another level that we need to get to. And then kind of, you know, zooming out as a more of like a product opportunity. I'm really interested in platforms that enable collaboration across public and private sectors. So like everything from like the contracting process being very difficult, like why don't we just have a common app for like contracts, government contracts? It's just like crazy, like every single city is different and every company is different, and it's like, why are we doing all these red lines when this has been done a million times before? But then I think actually like kind of what you're doing with Strata, also allowing that in the physical environment, like how do we share designs and just make things move faster? Because I found that a lot of cities, like they're pretty opaque in how they actually do things and make decisions, and if there was like a way to actually you know, collaborate a little more, I think that hopefully would accelerate some of these projects.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things we're attempting to solve and building towards. Of course, it has its own challenges, but of course, in recent news with the advances in AI, there's a lot of potential use cases for it where at the average user level, a person can take advantage of, even if you're working for public sector, the public sector. And what we have to kind of look at is how do we go a little bit beyond the average, like, hey, look, I'm going to drag and drop my PDF into, let's say ChatGPT, and it's going to answer a bunch of questions. So what we try to build is more around contextualization within a framework. So in this case, it's physical assets and the process around those physical assets. That's something that we look at every day, essentially, and trying to make sure that we're like able to kind of draw threads where it's not just like a one and done solution.
So on kind of a related note to those questions, to what extent are you using off-the-shelf computer vision, AI, generative AI models versus focusing on building your own thing? To those of you that can speak to that, I'd love to know more about that process.
Yeah, when we started, so our company, we really started working on this in a concept almost 10 years ago. The company is younger than that, but the kind of origins of it are almost 10 years old. And about 10 years ago, like, computer vision was still really, really new, and it was basically a field advancing only in research and not in the real world, not in products, very much. And so when we started, we did almost, we were using like off-the-shelf hardware, but we were developing our own algorithms and neural networks and things that like already have kind of like gone out of fashion. Today, we basically, build off of YOLO and like super open source things. So I think we've seen in computer vision the democratization of these technologies and the open source nature. It just develops so much faster than really any individual company, at least a startup could. Like if you're working maybe at IBM or Meta or something where there's like huge research teams being funded to work on this and they're advancing that research, that's one thing. But I think when you're building also, like in our case, a very vertically integrated solution where the computer vision is only one piece, we're really benefiting from those open source technologies. So that's actually kind of why I said one of the issues is training data, because actually the building blocks, there are so many building blocks out there, but the training data is what makes a lot of these, we're a computer vision company, but really any like machine learning based or AI product, very targeted and specific and accurate, like that comes from having good training data. So, I would say like at this point, like our product is a mix of open source tools and like very product specific proprietary training data.
When we started Dollaride, we began with building our own mobile and web applications. But even in doing that, much like what Tara said, you're building on the blocks of components that were already built and designed before you. So I feel like we all are kind of standing on the shoulders of giants in ways when we're building our products. So whether that's open source or using like flat tools that are right off the shelf and already commercialized, we all are kind of using like this hodgepodge of things to experiment and to get results and deliver solutions to our customers. But yeah, long story short, we started out building our own product, use a lot of open source libraries and tools. But then when we've got contracts and work with government agencies, they are very risk averse, and they don't want products that may or may not work or only work in this very narrow use case. So for those projects, we tend to use a lot of off-the-shelf products, and those are things that have been tried and tested already. So I guess it depends on the situation, depends on who the customer is, but we're using both proprietary and off-the-shelf tools.
I can just add quickly to that. If you're building something or starting something, you actually want to do that because if you want to get other people working on your product, you need them to it's much easier to recruit, a software engineer in a language that's well known and used, across many platforms. Like, you don't want to be using the lowest level language or some super niche platform or OS. You want to be using things that other people know how to build on, because it's just going to open your pool of who you can work with, who's skilled. And it is funny because these things do kind of, the Overton window sort of shifts over time. So we're really a very Python focused house in terms of all of our data science, but there's a whole other school that's coding in R or just other languages. Ruby on Rails was really big when we were first starting our company, and we find it's not really anymore, and so we're kind of glad we didn't choose that. But these, at every layer of the stack, there are considerations, and you want to, I think, choose things that actually are more widely adopted, because it's going to allow you to work with the best people.
Basically what Tara said, we definitely look at where we're building on open source, and you do want something that is, the skill sets that are available in the market, you want to kind of cater to those as well. And when we think about, in terms of off-the-shelf products, we've been asked, hey, are you using OpenAI, and is that your backend or something like that? And, just based on what was in the news. And we started building a little bit before that was readily available, but also we have to kind of take into account that if we're dealing with the public sector, the government, we cannot just use off-the-shelf parts, if you will. So we have to kind of make sure that we communicate that correctly, and then we communicate how we're approaching the problem and how we're building when we're communicating with all these individuals.
Great, thanks. Relatedly, given those answers about the usage of open source, the usage of open models, things that you can draw on and kind of take from the academic community in some sense, what's kind of either research or tools or things that you would like to see emerging from the academic community, or questions you'd like to see studied more that would be useful, push your product forward? It's a fairly open-ended question. Take it however you want it.
Joe Chow from the C2SMART, we've talked a lot, personally about wanting to create digital twins of cities and certain systems, so that it's easier for academia and entrepreneurs to digitally create solutions or model things before we go out and spend the money and time and resources to do it in the real world. I think part of what, inspired the MATLAB simulator, it's like a... MATSIM,
yeah.
Is that the full name? Did I just give you the full name? MATLAB simulator?
I guess MATSIM is probably short for MATLAB simulator. I've never thought to ask.
But yeah, that's a great example, but we need more of that. We need to have that for every city, and that would make it easier for, folks who are working in city agencies and for businesses and startups to experiment and do it in a way that's cheaper and faster. So, yeah, that's the type of stuff that I think would be transformational.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting, and I guess that would be useful so long as, and I think this is what you're saying, Sue, but it has both sort of a physical twin and simulation component and basically an economic one, because I do think a lot of the problems that we're facing in cities are not actually technical problems. The technology is there, it's how do we convince them to adopt, and how to do that is basically model the financial and economic implications of these decisions. So like, you know, New York City, part of why this is an exciting place to be working on urban technologies is it's just at such an immense scale that any little thing you save actually can have, you know, implications of millions or even billions of dollars for the city, whereas in, you know, a smaller city, a Dayton, Ohio, or you know, I'm just making up any small city, the efficiencies that you might capture may not really justify that like upfront investment, at least, you know, not to start. And so the more that we can paint that picture very clearly for cities, I think would be really valuable.
So I just wanted to talk about actually our collaboration with NYU itself, and we kind of approached it in a creative way. So because we're a bit earlier in our journey, we kind of wanted to study other market segments of the AEC industry and where we can apply what we built, and where benefit can happen. So in terms of that collaboration piece, I think there are many ways of doing it, and it's not just like via tech, can be via economics or studying it from a marketing standpoint or an economic standpoint. And then just in the other terms, you know, bringing products to classrooms earlier and just giving it to the students and letting them kind of operate on it. And I think that helps as students move on to the real world in a certain sense. So then they're more open to kind of adopting new technologies earlier, whereas sometimes when we talk to individuals in the private sector, they're, you know, the last 10, 15 years, let's say, they've been using the same tool. And that tool generally hasn't advanced, so it's the same 5 steps, and that's what kind of stagnates industries in a certain sense. And adoption becomes harder because of that. So that's how we're collaborating in the academic space.
Makes sense. And kind of, I think classically, think of kind of transportation as an area that's a little bit more slow moving than some other industries. So a lot of civil engineering industries have this, I think, property, just because it touches on critical infrastructure. But what is one thing that you would change maybe to unlock the pace of progress in this subfield? Or a pain point that you think is particularly a problem for the pace of progress here?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I will say, as like a company that deploys on public physical infrastructure, it's amazing how much cities still have not gone through like the basic digital transformation that private sector enterprise has. So even just like digitizing inventory, like where are all the light poles? What is installed on each light pole? Like that very basic task has not been done in a lot of cities, or they don't know like what the parking signs say on every street. And these are things that, you know, we have the technology to do. So the more that could get done, great. Why hasn't it been done yet? Well, that is where I think, you know, maybe cities just being more open to using open source tools would help a lot, because there are just so many like easy ways to solve these things, and it's amazing how afraid cities are to use open source tools, not realizing that like when it's open source, there are so many people that have contributed to that and are maintaining it. And when we look at the internet, like we have critical infrastructure that is based on open source. So why are cities not applying that? Definitely understand the risks, but I think like there are smart enough people working in cities to tackle that and learn how to trust it or adopt it responsibly.
I think one thing cities can do, or at least try, if they have a budget, is create challenges and innovation prizes and like programmatic ways to invite and engage the innovators in their city to deliver solutions. New York City is doing pretty well at that. Like, I think we've made a deliberate effort Tara, I know you also participated in the NYC EDC's research study on
Initiative 31.
Initiative 31. So you guys might hear about this soon, but NYC EDC and maybe even some other some academic institutions created a research study that proposes how New York City can engage with startups better and create and provide this platform for innovation. So, these types of things are great ideas, I think, because they do two things. One, it helps the city really leverage the talent and the resources that they have right underneath their noses. But it also helps startups and small businesses like ours get an easier path to the decision makers or to the money that allows us to test our solutions. So there is a programmatic way you can do this that's transparent and equitable for people to apply to and participate in. So yeah, that in combination with just having Google Docs and real records of what's going on, I think would be steps in the right direction.
So our experience in dealing with cities, it seems like at the individual level, people do understand there's a need for, let's say, adoption of newer technologies or more open source technologies. But it seems like at the group level, there's a lot of stumbling blocks, and some of them are there on purpose. But I think better training for even individuals who are meant to deal with startups would be a better source of investment for cities. So in terms of knowing how to deal with a new company that has something and testing it, let's say, many times in the public sector, people are unaware that there are steps to do that. And so we've had to kind of hold hands essentially and say hey, this is how you get this done in your own process. So I think that that can be due to high turnover, whatever the case may be, institutional knowledge being lost because people leave. But I think there needs to be a bit more investment there.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I think a lot of cities hire consultants to tell them how to do that, but those consultants, it's not actually in their interest to help cities innovate because they like being the big firm that the city hires. So yeah, it's just a funny irony that unfortunately I think sometimes the experts that cities go to, they're not actually motivated to help the city move faster. They like the business model where the city has to pay them millions of dollars because they're a many decades old firm that is trusted by the city.
Those are, insights that I did not have, not having engaged with cities in the ways that you all have. And I think one last question before we switch it over to audience questions, and maybe one that I probably should have asked earlier, but how did you stumble upon your idea? What was both the process and the insight that led you to be oh, okay, this is what I should be spending a bunch of time on. This is the best idea I'm going to have for a bit.
You can start. So I think I shared at the top of the talk kind of how we started in that, we had a sort of, I think everyone on this panel has actually had some either personal or professional experience that informed their product. In our case, we really care about transportation equity. So what I mean by that is making sure that everyone has access to safe transportation, and that includes people who don't own cars or can't drive for some reason. So we are a very mission-driven company. I would say, first and foremost, what has kept our heads in the game is our country has not solved the issue of pedestrian safety. Pedestrian fatalities have increased 70% since 2010, and there's no consensus on why because there's really not good data about the problem. And so that's some of the data that we hope to be contributing to the conversation. But I would say how we actually started. We were kind of working on this idea of a better bike head sensor as a side project. We, at the time, were in the city of St. Louis, Missouri, which is a kind of small enough city that we were able to work with someone in the mayor's office to partner with us and apply for a grant. At the time, I don't think the program exists anymore, but the Jonas and James L. Knight Foundation used to have a grant program called the Prototype Fund, and it was literally just to fund prototypes that aligned with their mission. So we won this grant, and we kind of like basically kept winning little things like that. We sort of said, if in 3 months we don't hit X milestone, we'll stop doing this. But if we do, then we'll kind of double down a little more. And if by, 3 months after that, we don't hit Y milestone, we'll stop. But if we do, maybe we'll double down. And we just kind of kept gaining that traction until finally we had to like make a call, like, I think we're doing this full time. And yeah, I mean, that's how we started. I would say, we are solving such a niche problem that we have actually not changed our vision all that much from the beginning. Like who we serve and the exact function of our product is the same, but that's not true for every company. And of course, there are lots of little detailed kind of nuanced things that we have changed. And I think the important thing when you start a company or start working on a project is like, we like to say like, having strong opinions weakly held. So run at something really hard, but if you find information that disproves that's the right way, be willing to pivot and adapt, because that's really critical. Like being stubborn is actually a thing that kills companies.
Great points. For Dollaride, the way we started the company, or like where the idea came from, was it was like a snowball of experiences and points of insight that led me to believe that, okay, I should actually start a company now to capture this opportunity that I think I see, but was, justified or informed by several experiences that I've had over the years. Some of those experiences included, just living in New York, like many of us do, but living in an area where I couldn't rely on the MTA bus to pick me up, or it was too far for me to walk to the subway, but instead, I used dollar vans. So I always thought, man, that's pretty interesting. I know people in my neighborhood do this, but it doesn't seem like something that is everywhere and that everyone knows. So I kind of like had this, it's kind of interesting. Then flash forward a few more years, I meet people at NYU, including Professor Eric Goldwyn, who he now teaches, but when I first met him, he was getting his PhD at Columbia, and he actually studied transit deserts globally as part of his thesis for his PhD. And then he had like this very particular section on New York City dollar vans. So that also was like another kind of checkpoint, like, there's an academic guy, he seems really smart, he's studying this stuff, he's come to like similar conclusions and insights that I have. And and this was from my lived experience, but now here's someone who's kind of taken a broader view at this phenomenon, and that was just really encouraging to me. Then there were other data points, including finding out that the city had also invested in a program called Group Ride, which was in 2009, but that was a program that was supposed to integrate the dollar vans into the MTA bus service. So like that also gave me some confidence, knowing that, okay, the city is actually kind of open to this, but some way, somehow, no one's figured out how to really integrate this informal system into the public transit system. So all those things just gave me confidence that there could be an opportunity here if I'm agile enough and if I assemble the right team. And that was really like the motivation and the precipice to Dollaride.
Yes, I think I did share a little bit earlier as to how I came up with the idea and the motivation motivations and behind it. But in my experience, so I've worked in the traditional AEC space for a while, the typical billable hours from construction management, project controls, construction inspection, all the way to transportation planning and engineering. And my kind of last role, I realized that I was able to grow a team in the public sector of planners and engineers. And as I was training individuals to kind of build that team out, a lot of people said, "Oh, is this it?" And it was because we were repeating tasks. It was the same 5, 6, 10 steps. And I realized that people many times don't want to do these 5, 10 steps and just continue, like, is that the next 20 years, right? Where is the innovation? And coupled with internal processes and frameworks where many, like, you couldn't even answer a simple question as, like, where are light poles, or where's the actual traffic, like, where is it actually placed in the environment? Like, simple questions couldn't be answered, plus these repeating tasks. And it exists in other frameworks in the AEC industry. So that kind of got me to look at the defense industry, because they take this more seriously than I would say at the city level, in that sense. So I realized that we should be taking that seriously as well, because it's about the built environment, and we use the built environment every day. So that kind of motivated me to kind of create this tool and go on this journey.
Thanks very much. So just in the interest of time, I think we probably have time for one student question, and then thank our speakers for answering, for coming to talk to us. Does somebody want to raise a hand, and I'll just bring the mic to them if they have a question? So otherwise, I can ask questions all day.
Yeah. This is the representative question. Very good. No pressure.
So what is one thing you really love about having a startup? And maybe you can give a concrete example, or it can be like a routine thing, or it can be more high level part of your everyday. Yeah.
What's your name, by the way?
My name is Daphne. I'm a PhD student here in the department.
Daphne? Daphne, have you ever played team sports? Like,
Yeah.
Okay,
Soccer.
soccer? At a high level, like in primary school or university? What was the furthest you took it?
I started when I was 9, and I stopped when I was 17 or something.
Oh, 17. Yeah, it's pretty, so yeah, very competitive, right? The reason why I asked and kind of drew your attention to team sports, because for me, this was like the parallel that I couldn't find a better example of, but it was definitely true in my life. I think, like in building a startup, the thing that I love the most is that feeling you get when your team wins. Now, in sports, that only happens per game, or maybe at best in each practice, right? You have a good practice. The team congratulates itself, hooray, right? But in building a company and in developing your startup, you get the chance to have many very little wins all the time. However, they are interlaced in competing with lots of failures, way more failures than the wins. So it makes the wins that much more enjoyable, but I feel like I'm on this constant journey of micro wins with my team. And when you have a great team, it makes the journey even that much better, right? Because people start really caring about each other, and they are constantly working and thinking about how to solve problems. But it's not that different from being on a sports team and going through a season and practicing and failing at practice, but going through games and winning some games, but losing some games, but enjoying the experience the whole way. That's how it's been for me, and I think it might be similar for a lot of other entrepreneurs.
I love that answer. Yeah, I thought you were going to go in a different direction, which is I actually love my team. Like, the building of the team and finding people who like really care about this extremely niche, nerdy thing, and who are willing to work like really hard on it is in and of itself like a win. And then yeah, I think the one of, I guess I'm also really stoked on the big wins when you get to like go and see a product that literally did not exist before you built it, and it's like out on a light pole in St. Louis, and then in, you know, a bunch of other cities, and then now we're in New York City, and let me tell you, it took a really long time, and it was very hard to work with New York City, but to then like be walking around and literally see a thing that you built out in the world is really, really cool. And it is a win for like you as an individual and for the team overall. Like it's a very cool feeling.
That just gave me goosebumps.
That was your analogy.
Yeah, that was a great analogy. So for us, it's, since we're a bit earlier, we're still going through the, like, I don't think this ever stops building the team phase. And for us, it's like the small wins, even if it's, let's say, we're designing something and building something and it kind of comes to life in a certain sense and it works the way you want it to work. And you kind of can see the boost in excitement and morale within your own staff, let's say, right? So that's the same thing as like kind of the sports analogy. It's that helps a lot in terms of just getting you to that next level, and that's what I personally look for. Of course, the big wins matter, but it all kind of adds up.
So thank you for your answers, and thank you all so much for coming out here to answer our questions. I guess let's thank our panelists for coming by. Sorry to the Zoom folks. Sorry to the Zoom folks who didn't get a chance to answer questions, but you know, too many good questions to ask. Yeah, so thank you all so much for coming. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.